Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Sarah Montague. A few weeks ago, the FBI turned up at the home of my guest today. He's a high-profile Islamic leader. His wife told them he was with the president. They thought she was joking. She wasn't. He was indeed at the White House, advising George W. Bush on Islam. Hamza Yusuf Hanson, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
What were you advising the US president?
I was invited to the White House through some Muslim contact people in Washington, and I did meet with the president. There was about 30 some odd religious leaders, religious scholars that were brought to the White House. Among them, a small group was met with the president in the Oval Office, and we were allowed to voice our opinions. He expressed some of his general reasons for bringing us there, his concern about the importance of religion at this time in America and the necessity of religious leaders really helping the American people through the crises. What I put forward were certain points that I thought were very important. I think the most salient ones were the absolute essential separation between the acts that occurred on September 11th and Islam. And I think that they knew that before I made that point, but I did.
And yet this is a president who uses the word crusade shortly
I think
afterwards.
crusade, I think that's an unfair thing to say. I think crusade is a word that would easily come to my mind. It's a legitimate English word, and for most Americans and British people, it doesn't suddenly inspire images of knights going off to Jerusalem. It really doesn't.
And yet, given who probably his most important audience was in the Islamic world.
Exactly, and I think jihad is a legitimate English word right now, so I think that it could have been used in that way, that this is jihad against people that are subverting social order, something like that. I mean, I think that it's a
So it wasn't just stupid?
I don't think that he's a stupid man.
What do you think of him?
I think that he's a very intelligent person. I think that, like many Americans, he's probably not really aware or as aware as Americans should be of what goes on around the world. I think that was one of the criticisms about him before he came into public office, or at least the highest public office in the land. So I think that is something that the administration in Washington really needs to bone up on, so to speak. They need to do some serious homework about Islam. I think that generally in the Muslim world, quite a bit is known about American foreign policy. In America, very little is known about how American foreign policy is perceived. Most Americans think, why are they so angry? We give them food all the time. We're always giving aid. We give billions of dollars in aid. Why are people upset with us? I think a lot of Americans really do genuinely feel that, and I think there's a lot of goodwill in America.
And yet you say the first piece of advice you give him is that this must not the fact that it's terrorism must be separated from the fact that these were Muslims who carried out these acts. Do you think that this is a war, whether the intention was that, or do you think it is in danger of becoming a war, if it isn't already, between the West and Islam?
I think that there's people within the Western academia and the political environment that do perceive Islam as a very serious problem. It goes, you can read Arnold Toynbee in the Civilization on Trial. He has a section in there he wrote in 1947 called Islam in the West. And in there, and many of these people read Toynbee still, in there he says that woe unto the West, paraphrasing, woe unto the West if we awake the sleeping giant of Islam as it has been awakened in the past. So I think that there is a real concern. There has to be.
Do you think, therefore, that the U.S. government is at war with Islam?
I think that it's very, very complicated, and I think that in reality, we have to accept the fact that America, on September 11th, something very profound happened, and America was attacked. I think to call it a war is very dangerous, because a war is a sovereign state aggressing on another sovereign state. Here we have a crime committed. I think it's really a crime that was committed in the state of New York and has federal implications because the primary suspects are from other countries. But there is no state declaring war on. Japan declared war on the United States after the attack on Pearl Harbor.
But since that event, there has been another significant event, which is that the U.S., a sovereign state, is attacking another sovereign state, Afghanistan.
And this is, I think, the real tragedy. I think that this is a tragedy because I think what it does is it begins to polarize the Muslim world. And I think that we're in danger of falling into this self-fulfilling clash of civilizations prophecy. I think that Muslims in the Muslim world, and I lived there for over 10 years, I've gone back a few times a year for the last several years, and I've made the pilgrimage to Mecca several times. The Muslims really do feel that the West has been relentless in its attacks. That is the perception. Whether it's valid or not, that's for people to decide. But that is the perception of the man on the street.
Okay, explain something, please. We have a call for a jihad as a result from the Taliban, from Al-Qaeda, saying all good Muslims must rise up.
Yes.
I'm sitting looking at someone who's speaking an American accent with white skin, speaking on behalf of the Muslim world. Can you explain that call to arms that seems to resonate around all Muslims?
I think most Muslims, there is a tradition in Islam that says that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that my community, my nation, is like one body. If part of it is suffering, the whole body suffers. And I think that this is difficult in the West. We've been very secularized. We're distant from religion. I don't think the type of Christian solidarity exists that you find in the Muslim world amongst Muslims. When we read about Chechnya, when we read about Kashmir, when we read about Palestine, when we see these as isolated parts of the geographical map. For Muslims, it's not really like that. They read about it with deep pain, feeling that these are their brothers and sisters, and they also feel impotized in that they're not doing enough for them. So there's a real feeling of impotence. Especially amongst the male population. When Bosnia, I remember when the women, all those rape stories coming out of Bosnia, I remember the pain that so many Muslim men felt, and a lot of tears, a lot of real grief and pain. And I think what happens, we tend to forget that the West, we numb our pain with intoxicants. In the West, most Western people have the option of taking drugs, of alcohol, just to kind of numb that angst, you know, that difficulty of life. In the Muslim world,
surely you can't say that. This is a humanitarian thing you're talking
well, hold
about.
on. What I'm saying is, in the Muslim world, intoxicants is not really an option for many Muslims. There's a lot of suffering, and I think one of the ways that
you can't say all the West just drink to get over problems.
I think that we have very serious problems in the West. 1 out of 10 people in Washington, D.C., according to U.S. Today, is addicted to drugs. I mean, we have serious problems. Really.
Come on, this is extraordinary. Almost a stereotype that the West are taking drinks or drugs.
Well, hold on. Look where we have the most serious problems, in the underclass of the West, in America, in the African American communities, in the Hispanic communities. These people tend to be the underbelly of our societies. There's a lot more pain in those communities. I think in the Muslim world, you have very similar situations. You have very critical social conditions that are really subhuman in some areas. You have a lot of repression. People don't realize this in the West. There's a lot of pain. What a lot of human beings tend to do...
And yet, well, hold on a second.
Well, hold on. Let me finish the thought. What a lot of people tend to do when they have pain is numb that pain. Anger is an opiate for pain. And I think that underlying a lot of the anger that we're seeing in the Muslim world is real grief.